on this Veterans Day, we remember and honor those on the front lines, but also those behind the scenes who played such a crucial, if silent, role in World War II.
One such group is the WASPs, or the Women's Air Force Service Pilots. It was a group made up of 1,000 women who helped ferry combat aircraft across the country during the war.
And some of the women are from Minnesota. Joining us today with more information about the program is pilot, teacher, and historian Frederick Bessler. Frederick, thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Hi.
Good morning.
Good to see you. Welcome to the show.
Great to be here and talk about the WASP and honor our veterans.
Well, what can you tell us about the WASP program?
The WASP program got started early in World War II as the United States, and of course England was already into the war, and it looked like the United States was going to be involved. And one of the problems that we had was we were going to need all of these brand new combat aircraft. Of every type, from trainers to bombers to fighters. They had plenty of manufacturing capacity, but we needed pilots to transport them from the factories to the outlying fields where the men would then take them into combat overseas. And so Jackie Cochran went to Hap Arnold, the chief of the Army Air Forces, and came up with this idea. There's all these women pilots, and we ought to be using them. In fact, Eleanor Roosevelt got involved herself and said, these women are a weapon waiting to be used. And so, sure enough, they started the WASP training program. A lot of these women, they had flying experience. The government knew who they were because it's a federal license. And so they contacted, invited them to the WASP, apply to the WASP program. 25,000 women applied. Wow. About 1,800 were accepted. And even though they had flying experience, they wanted to teach them to fly the Army way. And so they were sent down to Sweetwater, Texas, and they went through several months of training in combat airplane or training planes. And once they graduated, they were assigned to various airfields around the United States, and especially where aircraft were being manufactured. For example, Romulus, Michigan, which is now Detroit International Airport, that was the site of, they were building B-24 bombers there. And so the WASP would pick these brand new airplanes up and deliver them to, for example, Pueblo, Colorado, where the men were then learned to fly those airplanes and then go overseas into combat over Europe or in the Pacific. So
25,000 women applied for this, 1,800 made it, so less than 10%.
1,800 were accepted, 1,074 graduated with their WASP wings.
And some of those were Minnesotans.
They were.
Can you tell us about some of the Minnesotan women that were part of the WASPs?
One of the really well-known ones was Dora Jean Strother. She was from Minneapolis, St. Paul area. Very bright woman, had a PhD from Northwestern and New York University. One of her claims to fame was one of the airplanes that was developed was the B-29 bomber, which was actually developed to drop the atomic bombs. Initially, that airplane had a lot of engine fires, and men were starting to refuse to go to squadrons that were going to be flying those planes. Oh. So Paul Tibbets, who later did drop the atomic bomb, he took a couple of the WASP, and they took a B-29, and they toured the airfields where they were training men to fly that airplane and demonstrating how to safely fly that airplane, especially if they had an engine fire. And they performed wonderfully, and the men, being men, said, well, if the women can fly that airplane, we can fly it. And that solved that problem. And same situation with the B-26 Marauder bomber. They were having a lot of engine failures and accidents, and men were starting to refuse to fly that airplane too. So a couple of WASP took one of those planes around, toured the different airfields, showed the men how to do it, and solved that problem.
Well, those gals had to have had quite a chip on their shoulder. I'm sure that obviously, these talk about, this is a fairly long time ago, where women were plucked from regular life and put into a very important role. And I'm sure there's a lot of men who didn't like that.
There was resentment, but if you talk to, or if you read some of the oral histories, Texas Women's University down in Texas is kind of become the repository of all things WASP. They have the archives and artifacts, and but if you read some of the oral histories, they don't mention a lot of resentment, but there were cases. There were actually a few reported cases of sabotage, where a WASP was going to fly an airplane, and they had an accident, and they found that something had been put in the fuel or whatnot. One of the WASPs solved that problem. When she was going to test fly an airplane that had been repaired, she would go find the mechanic that had worked on the airplane, and she would tell him, "Okay, we're going to go test fly this airplane. You're coming along."
With.
And
Smart.
so
Good, yeah, very
that
smart.
solved that problem. Yeah.
Frederick, can you talk about a couple of the other Minnesota women? Because one that stood out to me was Jean Margaret Taylor Howard.
Yeah, she was from Hibbing, I believe, and I have my notes here in front of me. Yeah, she was one of the WASP, flew, there's a picture of her on the screen.
B-25 bombers, huh?
Yeah, that was the twin-engine bomber that Jimmy Doolittle made famous early in the war with the initial attacks on Japan when flying them off of carriers.
Well, and Jean Margaret is still alive today.
She is, yeah.
Wow.
And as I understand it, she also had a plaque at the old Metrodome. She was in the Minnesota Sports Hall of Fame for softball. Huh. And I hope that when they got rid of the Metrodome that they moved that plaque to a new location.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I was reading about another one of the Minnesota pilots who, after she was done in her service to the WASPs, she tried to become a pilot the rest of her life, and was not offered that opportunity.
Right.
Ended up going to work for the FAA or air control or something.
Yeah.
Isn't that not the most remarkable thing, to think that they were willing to step up when they were needed, yet when it was all said and done, they couldn't even become pilots?
Well, and the interesting thing is, even though when they were WASP, during the war, they reported to the military chain of command, through Jackie Cochran and then up to Hap Arnold, Chief of the Army Air Force. But they were considered civil service employees. And so uniforms, meals, that they had to pay out of their own salary. And there were 38 who died in service. They were not allowed a flag on their coffin, even when they died in a crash or an accident.
Wow.
And they did not get veterans benefits until the 1970s. And one of the interesting things is that, what was I going to say? I kind of lost my train of thought there.
Well, you know what? That's okay. Unfortunately, we're out of time right now.
Okay.
Anyway, so thank you. That's a good place to pause. But Frederick, this has been a great conversation. And
great.
So nice to learn more about
these
Thanks
for having me.
Pilots
Women,
who are just so brave.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If you would like to read more about the WASP program, you can head to minnesotalive.com.